I think my success was built through the challenges I went through over there because living in India for 20 years and raising a family is very challenging.
Mm.
Working at Miri Piri was very challenging. By the end, I actually stopped taking days off because my work was from 5 in the morning till 11 at night, 7 days a week. And it's like being a parent, right? But I was a parent to 100 teenagers. And so that was very challenging life to live. Plus my personal sadhana, I had times when I had 4 or 5 hours of meditation a day and really, practice in a deep way. It allowed me to grow and through the challenges.
So, welcome today at the Kundalini Awakening podcast. And today we have Amrit Singh from Mexico. Amrit Singh, welcome to the Kundalini Awakening podcast. Um, where are you from? Who are you? Who is Amrit Singh?
Well, thanks for having me, Gurgian. Super excited to be on your podcast and super excited to do this today. I'm originally German. So that's where I grew up. And then, I had a long journey around the world, ended up living in India for 20 years, and we can talk about that in more detail. And now I live in Mexico because my wife is Mexican. And just 2 years ago, we decided to move here, and we live in beautiful spring weather, 365 days out of the year. And I'm sure all the listeners can relate to darkness in Europe. I had that so many years, and so I'm so happy that I'm in Mexico now.
Yes, cool. And welcome again. And I'm gonna make a confession to the listeners of this podcast. I know Amrit Singh because somehow Amrit Singh popped up, I think 4 or 5 years ago. Was it in the COVID
I think
time?
it was only three, honestly.
Only three.
It was right in COVID, so it's not that long ago.
Oh, it's still only 3 years. My God, because I know you now from my perspective pretty well, because for the listener, just to know that Amrit Singh has been in my Kundalini Yoga coaching training in Germany, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And I've been coaching Amrit Singh now for also some years in implementing it. And to be honest, I must say I'm really proud because you're one of these few percentages of people who really fully become it, fully become a Kundalini, or no, actually you're a coach, you're a relationship coach and a holistic life coach, I guess. How do you call yourself?
Yeah, and I mean, I different ways, but really what I like the most these days is high momentum life coach, because I realize that the moment you step into your own momentum and into your own journey and you really take that to the next level, that's when the big changes in life happen. And so I'm so grateful to you for all the support you've given me over the years, because one of the reasons I actually moved away from Germany as the COVID cases went up again in the winter and went to Mexico is because through the coaching with you, I had that confidence that I could do it, and it all worked out beautifully.
Yeah, cool. So there's quite a journey we're going to talk about, because you had the reason why you started somewhere down the road Kundalini Yoga. I guess then you became a teacher. You've been in India in the Miri Piri Academy, which some of my listeners know as the yogic school where the yogi children go to. You've been there for 20 years, 25 years?
20 years in India, yeah, 20 years was a big part of my life. And so, I look back at it fondly. I learned so much there.
Yeah, and now you're moving to this high momentum, high impact momentum. Can you
High
repeat?
high momentum life coach I like because it really it comes down to that, right? To that 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 journey requires just to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. But I think our listeners want to first know, how did you end up in India?
Oh, so that whole journey started when I was a teenager. And growing up as a regular teenager in Germany, like I did all kinds of stuff, like the whole thing with the school and, following the rules was not so much my thing. So I was much more into, going partying, smoking lots of weed. And because what I realized was I was finding a spiritual connection as a 15, 16-year-old in smoking weed. And ultimately, I thought like, oh my God, I got it figured out. I just need to smoke more weed.
But when was it? What year do we then talk about? When you were 14, 15?
Yeah, it was like 88, 89, like around that time. And but then after a couple of years, I realized, oh my God, this thing with the smoking weed doesn't work. I had that spiritual connection, but I was stoned all the time. So nothing changed. I was just lying around, looking back 3 years, nothing had changed. And I was just stuck.
Yeah.
And so when I found Kundalini Yoga with 19, now over 30 years ago, I got the same experience I only knew from smoking weed and taking drugs from my own practice.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like I can create this myself with my body, with my breath, with my applied consciousness. And that was the click for me, where I was like, I want a different journey. And that's what inspired me to dive deep into Kundalini Yoga, become a yoga teacher, and then ultimately 5 years later to just pick up all my stuff and say, I'm moving to India, where I ended up staying for 20 years.
Yeah, and I have some questions for that later, but I'm just curious, how did Kundalini Yoga find you?
It was actually a funny thing because it was through a friend of mine who had some, digestive issues, and he was young, and the doctors were telling him, "Oh, you're gonna have to be on medication for the rest of your life, and you can't eat 50% of the foods." And so he was really frustrated with that, and he found an Ayurvedic doctor who was also a Kundalini yoga teacher, and he went through this whole panchakarma cleanse and was actually able to change his body and get off the medication and really started getting healthy again. And so this doctor then said to him, hey, it would really be beneficial for you to practice Kundalini Yoga to continue with that. And so he organized our whole group of friends, was like 25, 30 of us, to come to a Kundalini Yoga class. And
And
only a very small percentage showed up. I mean, we all showed up stoned, and like
oh my
as you
God.
know, do not mix Kundalini yoga and drugs. It's
Yeah.
it's really a bad combination. And so we all went there and did the first class. And then after, the teacher was like, you know what, guys, I want to keep teaching you, but you cannot come stoned again, or I would kick you out of the class. And so we were like, oh shit. And so 20 of them dropped out, and a small group of 5 of us kept going back without getting stoned first. And that was really the beginning of the journey, where I was like practicing these meditations, and it was almost like a remembering of something I had done many times before. And I was like, this is the way for me. And I dove in really deep and changed my diet and woke up early and stopped with the drugs and the alcohol and really like cleansed out. And that's challenging when you're 20, right? When you're just figuring stuff out and all your friends are still going partying. And so that was that journey. And yeah, it was life changing for me.
Yeah, and then was there a specific moment where you felt like, okay, where you felt called to go to India, or you were just how does that work?
Well, my first breakthrough was at White Tantric Yoga at the yoga festival in France, and that was still when it was in Loche, in that old place. I don't know if you remember that.
I have not even been there. Yeah.
And it was like 250 people, right? It was tiny, and it was the beginning stages. And after meditating for 3 days, I had such profound and deep Kundalini rising experiences, which I had never experienced with any of the drugs I was taking. And I was like, why would I want to take drugs? This is so much better.
Mm.
And so that's really when the journey began. And then I realized I wasn't able to sustain it being in Germany because I always got pulled back. At like 3 months, then for 6 months, I was able to live this healthy lifestyle. But always my environment and my friends and, the dark winters in Europe pulled me back into my old habits. And so after this happened over a couple of years, I was just like, not one more time. And I just packed my bags and, called up Miri Piri Academy and said, do you guys need a volunteer? Because I'm coming.
Mm.
And that was for me the breakthrough moment.
Yeah. Okay, exactly. So it started actually with such a deep, profound meditative experience during the White Tantra. Can you
Yeah.
maybe explain to listeners who have no clue what that is, such an experience? How does it work? How does it feel? Because you read all kind of crazy stories about Kundalini awakening and so on. How was it for you?
Well, for me, it was really profound. I had never meditated for such a long period of time because in the White Tantric Yoga, we meditate 7, 8, 9 hours a day. And it allowed me to connect to my body at such a deep level where I felt deeply grounded and at the same time super high and super connected. And that was really for me where I could feel myself the first time in my life to be truly in my human potential. And I felt my energy expanding and I slept less time. And I was, in this high energy of Charity Kala, of really just motivation and joy and happiness. And I was like, okay, I want more of that. And I'm going to do what it takes to get more of that.
Exactly. So that motivated, and then you figured out in Germany there was not the right environment, not the real yogic environment, and you figured out it was in Miri Piri. So what is it? How was it? Because that was Miri Piri. Ooh, that's now 25 years ago.
Yeah, 99 I went.
99. So then what was Miri Piri back then?
Well, Miri Piri had just opened. It was like, I think they opened 97. So they were still in the process of building the buildings, putting the grass in for the soccer field. So it was really like in the early stages. And it was a wild time. When I got there, the kids were all over the place. There was very little structure. There was like really almost like Lord of the Flies. There was these teenagers running the school and a couple spaced out yogis walking around trying to hold it together. And so when I got there, it was really, I was never the spaced out type of yogi, I was always very grounded. I was a troublemaker myself in school. So for me, it was like, ooh, I can relate to these kids. I know what they're going through. And it was really powerful. So this took us probably 5, 10 years to get the school to a point where things ran structured and the adults were in charge then.
Mm, And 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 what is it like for people that have children? If you would have your children there, how does a day in Miri Piri Academy look like?
The best way to explain it probably is it's it's all about the challenge, right? Because in the challenge lies the growth, right? Which we all know as Kundalini yogis, when we hold our arms up for 31 minutes and 2 minutes into it, we're like, oh my God, it hurts so much. I want to put them down. And you stick with the exercise and you go through that 30-minute experience. That's when you get the reward, right? That's when things start shifting. And so Miri Piri was designed in the same way. So we would have an early wake up at 5 o'clock, get the kids out, do a prayer with them, do japji in the morning together. And that was hilarious because, imagine 100 teenagers sitting at 5 o'clock in the morning where they all really want to be in bed and asleep. Because, like, one of the misconceptions I had was thinking that every teenager who was there really wanted that deep spiritual experience. That was not true. They just all wanted to party and they
Ah,
wanted to have fun, but they were still there because deep inside they had this connection. There was something, right? There was something where they knew if they could just get pushed a little bit and challenge themselves, that they could grow. And they could do that as teenagers. And so we designed the program around that. So really the whole idea was to keep them super busy, super engaged. So we would do japji in the morning, then we would do sports afterwards, then they have breakfast, then it was a regular day of school, then we would do team sports in the afternoon, do an evening meditation together, and really just keep them on their toes all the time, so that by 9, 10 o'clock at night, they were all so tired that they just fell into bed.
Mm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because I had once one of our a young woman of 15, 16 who was taking care of our daughter sometimes. A few years, just right before COVID, she went to Miri Piri, and she was always a little bit this shy, uh, withdrawn young girl. And she only went there for 1 year. But when she was back, she was like powerful, strong, radiant. I was so amazed by just this transformation in 1 year. Yeah, for you guys, maybe it was different because you had them all the time. But if you see it daily, the shift is maybe not so big. But I saw huge shift of these young beings. Incredible.
Yeah, because guess what happens when for 9 months out of the year, you exercise twice every day, you meditate for an hour or two, and you do that as a teenager,
Yeah.
right? There's such profound impact. And I think the best way listeners can probably understand it is like when you have sent your kids to summer camp and they come back 2 weeks later and you're like, oh my God, they grew so much. They
Yeah.
feel so much more confident. They're so much more connected to themselves. Now imagine not sending them away for 2 weeks, but for 9 months, and then doing that for a couple of years in a row. It was so profound, like this deep level of confidence, right? These kids found. It's actually like one of the funny jokes we had at Miri Piri is that, when you would go to the yoga festival and you look at the teenagers, you could pick out the kids that went to Miri Piri just by the way they walked.
Yeah.
Because, there was so much confidence in those 15, 16, 17-year-olds because they connected at such a deep level with their true identity, with their Satnam, right? With their real being that, they had the whole world in front of them.
Yeah, exactly. But just on the other side, I can imagine it must have been difficult for these children if they then been for 4 or 5 years at Miri Piri, going back to the US or Europe or Asia, wherever they came from.
Yeah, super hard, because the problem was that they didn't recognize how important community was for them in order to keep up with everything, right? And so when they went out and they were just like, oh, I live with my parents, I go to school, and the whole onslaught of the world came on them, they were not able to truly sustain that. But
And
what I've seen now, 20 years later, is really that all of those kids who went through the process have gotten a lot of security and strength in them as adults, because they always know they can come back to that capacity and that strength inside of them.
yeah, so it's a gift for life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what was your role at Miri Piri?
I probably worked in every single position there was. I came as an assistant, then I was the assistant in the medical room to the assistant nurse, and then like it went up from the assistant in the boys' dorm, and then I worked with the boys, and then I was in charge of the boys, and then ultimately I became the director of residential life for the last 10 years, which was really everything from day-to-day life, discipline, going on trips, following up with them. Everything which was not academics was kind of what I was in charge of.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember very well when you were with me in the Kundalini coaching training, where I shared the philosophy of coaching, and I remember very well you said like, okay, yeah, this coaching, this is what I have done for 20 years with these kids over there, right?
Yeah.
Because you have been, it must have been with the people from that age to coach them. How do you do that?
Oh, it's very interesting because it's the only possible approach with a teenager. You cannot do anything else with a teenager. You can't tell them anything, you can't teach them, you can only inspire them. And I think what I always attracted me so much to the life coaching is it's never about telling someone what to do. It's drawing out what's inside of them already and then empowering that, right? And so was a lot of the work to get these teenagers to get out of bed at 5 in the morning was around coaching them through it, and really to get them to like, hey, why are you here? Why did you make this commitment to come to Miri Piri? Why are you in India for 9 months? To lie around in bed and pretend you're sick, or to really challenge yourself? And it was interesting because they came to this point themselves where they're like, yeah, I want to be strong. I want to grow. I want to challenge myself. I want to exercise. I want to learn how to meditate. And that's when it got interesting, right? And then you just needed to keep that momentum going and keep them in motion for them to really, find their own strength.
But that's really powerful what you were just saying, because uh, what you did, you basically asked them about their why, right? Why they're here, and then they would give their reasons, and basically they were coaching themselves, committing themselves, motivating themselves, right?
Yeah.
Instead of you telling them what to do.
Yeah, it doesn't work with teenagers. So
It doesn't.
your daughter is getting there soon. You're prepare yourself.
Yeah.
But everybody of the listeners who does have a teenager at home, they know you cannot tell them what to do. It backfires. You need to inspire them to do what they want to do, and then you can show up as an ally and as a support, and really guide them.
Yeah, because and I think this whole 20 years, I think was lay also your foundation, why you grew so fast as a rising star in the coaching field, because you're within a few years you become a full-time coach, which I know of having educated more than 250 Kundalini coaches. It's not so easy,
Yeah.
right? So do you think that your success was built over there, or how does it work?
I think my success was built through the challenges I went through over there, because living in India for 20 years and raising a family is very challenging. Working at Miri Piri was very challenging. By the end, I actually stopped taking days off because my work was from 5 in the morning till 11 at night, 7 days a week. And it's like being a parent, right? But I was a parent to 100 teenagers. And so that was very challenging life to live. Plus my personal sadhana, I had times when I had 4 or 5 hours of meditation a day and really, practice in a deep way. It allowed me to grow and through the challenges, right?
You,
Because there's no growth without.
you did sadhanas of 4 to 5 hours?
Yeah, for several times over the years, just because in India it's a beautiful setting to be able to do a sadhana like that. Because
And
you have someone who cooks the food for you, you have someone to help you clean, you don't have to worry about, driving the car because we had staff and support for all of that. And so it allowed me to really prioritize my own personal practice at that deep level and be able to do stuff like that.
and you were then meditating for 5 hours. Did you go to the Golden Temple, or you were just sitting in your
Or
room?
I did different things because we would do these 40-day programs. We would at least once a year do a 40-day seva at the Golden Temple, where we would wash the floors and get up every day at 1:30 a.m. to drive there at 2 and be there for between 2:30 and 4 and then be back home at 4:30. And that was always a beautiful time for practice because you could combine it with going to the Golden Temple for 40 days. And then doing other times, we would also do a 40-day sadhana every year, where we would, start later, maybe at 3:30 or 4 a.m., and then, do a 2.5 hour practice with the kids who were into it, right? So we would try to turn it into something inspirational and get groups of 20, 30 teenagers who would show up on their own motivation to do this on top of the whole rest of the program.
Yeah. So once they were self-motivated.
Or some more than others,
Yes.
but The ones who were self-motivated, that's where the ones who we could support and allow them to do more. Like, to have as a teenager to have the chance to do a 2.5 hour sadhana every morning because you choose to do that, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's one of the most transformative things you can do. I'm just wondering, um, when you were in the Miri Piri, I don't. Yogi Bhajan was almost. He was almost dead. He was very sick already. And you met him over there, or
Yeah, he had come to the French yoga festival.
Hmm.
And he had talked about Miri Piri and that they just open and this and that. And he's like, oh, and any one of you who want to come and serve, you should come. And
Hmm.
so that was my motivation. I was like, oh, Yogi Bhajan said I should go. So that's how I went. And over the first 5, 6 years, no, not even 2 or 3, I think it was, he would come every year and visit and be with the kids and sit with them. And so it was a very, very close connection in that way.
And what was your impression of him back then?
I think it was pretty amazing what he had developed in his spiritual power and through his personal sadhana, right?
Hmm.
The ability of how to hold space and how to hold energy and how to activate and channel his Kundalini energy was for me unmatched. I'd never met anyone like that in my life before.
Even at that age, at when he was sick and
Oh
things.
yeah, yeah. Even with all the issues he was going through, because it was really just his physical body that had the sickness, right?
Hmm.
Mentally and emotionally, he was so sharp and on, and held space for 100 people with ease.
Hmm. Hmm. Because I never met Yogi Bhajan. I've always the first thing that always popped in my mind. Okay, yeah, maybe too bad, but I always thought, oh yeah, thank God I have not never felt his projection, so I can be free in a way. But did you learn anything from him or his projection or from his way of holding the Kundalini energy, or were you too young back then?
Well, one of the things I learned very quickly is that you don't just go up to him and ask a question if you were not ready to follow through whatever his answer was, right? It was very much in that system of teacher-student, of how it is in India. You don't just go to a teacher and say, oh, Yogi Ji, what should I do? And he says, go move to Japan and open an ashram there and teach yoga every day. Those people moved to Japan to open an ashram, right?
Exactly.
So I was like, maybe I should not ask him any direct questions.
You were already at Miri Piri in India. I mean, what?
Yeah, so what I did actually is I went to Miri Piri on my own.
Yeah,
And then when he came visited 6 months later, I got a chance to talk to him and I said, hey, sir, I just wanted to ask, is this okay? Like, is this good for me to be here?
yeah.
He's like, oh, yeah, sure. Stay for a couple of years and study and learn and then go out in the world and teach. So
And
that
where?
was the hook in my gut. And I was
Okay,
like, okay, not to Japan.
okay, but that's interesting. So that was the hookum to stay there for 20 years.
Well, I ended up staying for 20 years. I think I just ended up getting comfortable, right? Because, I had a big position. My children were small. We were set up in a good way. And so I got comfortable towards the end, which actually got my wife and I to the point where we decided to leave because we're like, hey, we're just comfortable. When you're in your comfort zone, you don't grow. And we wanted to grow. We're like, we don't want to be here for another 20 years. And then by 60, 70, be like, okay, we move on now. We were in our 40s and we decided this is the time to make a change and start the second half of our adult life.
Yeah, exactly. And then how did you end up with coaching?
Honestly, I stumbled on one of your little brochures, where you talked about life coaching, and I was like, wow, life coaching. I've been doing this the whole time. I didn't know it was called life coaching. And I was so excited after reading it. And then you had this course coming up in Germany in the middle of COVID. And I'm like, I'm signing up. I'm going there no matter what happens. I just needed to get out of the house. And for me, it was really a breakthrough to hear it like so clearly explained, where you went through the process of, hey, this is how we serve the clients. And look, this is important too. And you need to understand marketing, and you need to understand sales, you need to brand yourself. And I was like, oh, wow, like I already by then knew how to coach because I had a lot of experience, but I had no clue of how to get clients in front of me. I had no clue on how to ask for an exchange which is monetary and have that be in balance. So that was really the biggest part of my journey to learn all that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can imagine when you're in India, it's a kind of one big seva, right?
Yeah, it's like, you actually just recently shared with me the 9 treasures, right? And there's the 9 treasures of the spiritual life, and then there's the 9 treasures of the material life. And I was reading through the 9 treasures of the spiritual life, right, which have all these amazing things in there. And I'm like, oh, I've done all this stuff. I spent so much time expanding my spiritual identity, and I completely disregarded the whole material thing. It's like, oh, I don't need money. I'll just sit in a cave and meditate all day. And so now, leaving out of India, leaving out of Miri Piri, leaving out of this cocoon, which was very protective place to dive deep into spirituality, I realized, oh my God, I need money to pay rent. I need money because in the beginning, one of my biggest challenges, and you remember this, was like, oh, I'll coach anyone. I'll just do it for free. And I was coaching people left and right. And then I realized, oh my God, I need money. Well, what am I going to do for that now? Do I need to get a job? And so that was for me really the breakthrough moment when I realized I want to do this full time. I don't want to just coach for fun and then find money somewhere else. I wanted to bring those two sides together. And so that's been my inspiration to really say, like, how can I create so much value for my clients that they happily pay me and they feel they got 10 times more than they invested?
Yeah, exactly. Because money and spirituality is always a difficult subject, right? I've worked on myself on this money issue for the last 10 years. It took me really a lot of inner work to come in agreement with it. You are doing this much faster, thank God. How does it work for you?
I really love it because I realized that the spiritual growth I had in the last 2 years working on my material side of life, right? Working on how do I put myself out there when I create a video, when I show my face, when I show up authentically. It, money is just part of our identity in this 2D world we live in, right? Where everything is just like, you know, you either have money or you don't have money. You either have a nice place to live or you don't have a nice place to live, right? You either can afford to have a car or you walk places. And so I realized that it became a big and profound part of my spiritual development to be able to integrate that level of prosperity without sacrificing my spiritual connection. And that was my big flaw in the beginning, where I thought like, oh, if I just don't think about money, I can focus on spirituality. But that was just, that was kind of to warm up to get to that level where I was like, okay, now the real challenge is how to be abundant and prosperous and just be as spiritual and then combine those two and really take it to the next level.
Yeah, exactly. And where do you think this myth of that spirituality and money and business cannot go hand in hand? Where does it come from?
I
Because I have
think it
a lot
comes
of people.
from I think it comes from the point that when you start out on the spiritual path, it is much easier to renounce the material world, right? And that's why the monks shave their hair and they put on the robe and they sit in a cave and they just eat their dal and their bread. But ultimately, that is just a tool to get you to a certain level of spiritual development where now you can start integrating this, you know, prosperity, on how to earn money, how to do these things. And when you look at all the spiritual leaders in the world, they have all figured this out, right? There is not one who has to worry about financial support or abundance. You know, they have everything at their fingertips because they also understand it ultimately can serve the mission they're on, and they can reach more people the more, you know, financial impact they have themselves.
So that's interesting. So you're basically saying there are multiple stages in your spiritual journey, because I know a lot of people that probably listen to this podcast are on a spiritual journey, or they either are just on it with the Kundalini, but it's, and I've always figured out it's so nice to have perspective, right? To know this is not, because that's what I thought in the beginning. Oh, now I have to be for this forever, right?
Yeah.
This renouncing monk, and it's so limiting. Oh my God. But it was also so good. So also with for me, I really want to give all people also who are in my teacher trainings, I really want to give them that experience of really living this life of a sadhu, really everyday sadhana, your diet is perfect. And I think, because I think it's necessary, like as a first step.
Yeah,
To
it's a tool.
It's a tool to
Yeah.
figure out yourself.
Yeah.
And once you figure out yourself, you have to find a way to express it, and then you have to deal with all the earthly stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it comes back to the concept of Satnam, right? It's just that simple. That's the one first mantra we all learn in Kundalini Yoga. It's all about expressing your true identity. And that's the ultimate goal, to come to this authentic point. And we all need money to live, right?
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah, exactly. And how are you integrating? Because you have so much experience, which is for you so normal. We talked about this in one of our coaching sessions. For you, it's so normal, your spiritual growth and the spiritual life, but it is actually the most profound. And how are you integrating that into your coaching?
I realized I integrated with everything I do, and it just comes naturally, right? I mean, sometimes I sit with my clients and we go into meditation. And one of the feedback I get from people, which still till today always surprises me, is that when we sit on Zoom and we do a meditation together and I lead them through a process, they come out with tears in their eyes saying, "Oh my God, I've never meditated this profoundly in my entire life." And I was like, really? You know, because I forget, right? That is not normal for other people.
Yeah, exactly. With what kind of problems are people finding you? Because I know a lot, you work with quite some different types of clients. Who are your clients?
I found the two types of people that are attracted to me is one, people who are struggling in their relationships, mainly men. I get this way, you know, where I really work with men in their marriages, you know, have been married 15, 20 years, and they come to a point where they're just like, oh my God, you know, my whole life is so sad. All I do is go to work, come home, then fight with my wife. There's no sex in the relationship, like, and I have another 10 years of this, and they're just ready to jump off a bridge, right? And they're struggling at such a deep level. So the moment they find me, and we're creating the spark in their spirit, in their spiritual connection of, who am I? What is my Satnam? What is my true identity? Now suddenly they start expanding again. You know, they start connecting to themselves, and then they want to be in their marriage. They want to be a father. They want to be a husband. They want to be a provider, because they now realize that life is so much bigger when you're actually connecting with your identity and with your spirituality. So that's one group of people I work with. And then I also work one-on-one with people who are going through challenges in their business, in their personal life, who just want to dive deeper into their spirituality. But it really always ties back to, how can I get deeper connected to my authentic self? Because from there, everything stems and everything gets expressed.
Yeah, exactly. And then how do you do? Because I know that first you started just with one-on-one coaching, but now you're also doing in group. What is the advantage of being in a group, in a kind of a group
I love
setting?
the group energy because it ultimately it creates this momentum in the group, where I can just take a step back and people support each other. And it's like, we're as humans, we're people who love community, who love coming together. And so I found that the group process really accelerates people's journey. And so for me, it's an amazing thing to witness that and to be allowed to be part of it.
And 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 because you had both roles, so I can ask you this question. And you talked about Yogi Bhajan, he's a classic teacher. What, in your opinion, is the difference between a teacher and a coach?
I think the difference is huge.
Mm.
A teacher tells you what to do. A coach will never tell you what to do, right? A teacher will inspire you by their lifestyle, their example, and you emulate to copy the teacher. The idea is not to copy your coach, right? I don't want my clients to become like me. I want my clients to find that connection in themselves, which makes them truly unique and truly themselves. So I would say those are the two biggest ones which I found.
Yeah, but I think when I'm really honest with myself, I think I'm a teacher coach or a coach teacher. What about you?
I think I'm a coach
Ooh.
because one of the things I always struggled with as a teacher was telling other people what to do. Because
Mm.
it's one of those things I really don't like. When someone tells me what to do, things don't go well. Because I'm like, all right, let's see if you're going to get me to do this. Right? So that's why I never asked Yogi Bhajan directly what I should do,
Yeah,
because I was
exactly.
like, I don't think I'm ready to do what he's going to tell me.
Because he would never tell you, Amrit Singh, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly. No, he was not a coach. He was a teacher.
Yogi Bhajan, because how would that look like, Yogi Bhajan as a coach? We
That would
cannot.
be very different.
It would be very different, right? But also kind of interesting, right? Because I think we also, as we have our yogic bagage or luggage, I don't know how you say, and then we create a different style. But I think we should. I think also you, even you're a coach, but just by who you are with your radiance and your presence, maybe people listening to it, but if they would see it, they would. I think
Well, I
that.
think the best way to explain it, because I was just thinking, what's the difference between a teacher and a coach? The teacher needs to sit on the stage,
Mm,
and the teacher needs a platform to share his teaching.
mm,
For me as a coach, I want to sit behind the stage and have my client be on the stage and
mm.
have them be the center of the show, right? And my job as a coach is to give through my strength, through my practice, through my experiences, make my client the star of the show rather than me being the star of the show.
Then what do you think is the added value of being both a yogi and a coach?
Well, for me, I would even extend that one step further. What's the added value of being a yogi, a coach, and have been a teacher? I've been a teacher for many years where I was on the stage, where I shared, and I realized that it's really, I learned so much from being a teacher. It's a very powerful position. I learned even more from being a student and having my teachers in my life. Because ultimately, when you're in a teacher-student relationship, it's a very clear relationship, right? It's about one person gives and the other one receives. One person tells and the other one listens. That's a teacher-student relationship. And so what I learned from that is how I can use all that depth of having been a student, having been a teacher, having practice as being a yogi, and now stepping into a coach to really allow my clients to fully express themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a kind of a bonus, right? It's an incredible bonus that you have so much experience, and I know that, and I tell you that, and I think you already now so successful, but you are now. I think you're not even seeing all the qualities you have and bring, but I think that that will evolve even more. Because it's the same with me, because it's sometimes not easy to see everything we've done through all these years of sadhana. It's so invisible and so common for us. But I think for a lot of people, this is not so common, and they will feel it, right? Because how are your clients? Are they all yogis, or are they have no experience?
I think only one or two of them. Most of them are not,
Yeah,
but they're attracted to that energy, right? And plus, on all my material, I wear my turban, I wear my beard. Someone who has an issue with that will not, come to my website. But the people who do come to me want that kind of stuff in their life. And again, they don't want a teacher. I will get people sometimes who want me to teach them something. And I will turn it around and I will really be like, come on, be your own teacher.
great.
What's your journey? You already have all the answers inside. I'll be by yourself to figure that out. But I want to be more than a teacher. And
Yeah,
that's why the coaching is so powerful.
yeah, and I agree. That's what I love, because it's so great to empower other people, right? That they because they grow from that. Otherwise, they stay in this dependency role. And I mean, we could talk forever about how that goes wrong, and maybe we'll do that in a different kind of
Yeah.
different type of podcast. Because it would
No,
be
totally. And this dependency is really important
yeah,
in the beginning stages, right? It's a little bit like when you have a child and the child grows up. That child is dependent on you, at least for the first 7 years. In today's time, probably for the first 14 or 21 years. But, like that first years, that dependency is very important, where you can teach and the child is the student. But then by the time they turn into teenagers, we talked about that, teaching doesn't work anymore. You need to coach and you need to show up in a different way. It's the same with students, I believe, right? For the beginning of the journey, it's very, very important to have a teacher to learn everything, right? And to understand things. But then it comes into that self-empowerment and into, breaking free from all those limitations and truly living the tantric lifestyle, right? And expanding in every direction.
yeah, yeah. So cool, Amrit Singh. I mean, we could talk for hours, but I will save that for another time if you wanna.
Yeah, we'll be super happy to come on again.
And if people want to contact you, or they want to see your profile, you have a website?
Yeah, I have a landing page for my coaching. I also have a separate one for the men who are struggling with their marriages. But probably the best way to find me is on Instagram, Facebook, or on TikTok. TikTok is really fun because I do, fun things on TikTok. So if you're a TikTok person, check me out there.
Okay, yeah. So we'll put the all your information below our podcast. Oh yeah, and just one funny thing, depending on when people listen this, but we're gonna give a retreat together.
Yes, super
End
excited
of
about
end
that.
of 2024, we go to Mexico, and we give a retreat. So if people want to join us, they're free to join. I will make sure that I also put the landing page to the retreat that Amrit Singh and I will do together in Mexico, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be super powerful and it's going to be such a profound experience for people because you're going to get us both.
Yeah,
And that's really going to be next level stuff. So I'm really excited about that.
me too. I'm also very excited. Thank you, Amrit Singh. It was a pleasure. I hope to see you again, and people will know now about you and how they can find you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Salam.
Salam.